Welcome to this presentation. My name's Nesta Eve and I'm a consultant clinical psychologist and work for the wellbeing service in Norfolk and Suffolk. Our strapline is to help people live their lives and helping people to tackle anxiety and any low mood for anyone over 16 years, and that can be with no upper age limit. So what I'm going to talk about today as part of Falls Awareness Week in Norfolk is to really talk about the fear of falling and how that has an impact on people often in later life, but not necessarily in later life, and how if people get anxious about falling again, that can really impact on people's quality of life and how we can help you and what services are available to help you if you have an anxiety around falling and it's having an impact on your life. I was hoping to do this as a live stream, but due to technological problems, I've been unable to kind of get the system working. So I'm recording this and you can watch it at your leisure. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. So I'm going to talk initially about the impact of fear of falling, because obviously it's not surprising. So that if someone has a fall or perhaps has a stumble or kind of near miss, that you can become really anxious, particularly if you had a fall and you ended up in hospital. It can make you very aware of the consequences of falling in the future. So it's quite common to have anxiety after a fall. And so it's really important to get some support to build up confidence and really know how to safely kind of maneuver around and make sure that you're kind of engaging in all the activities you enjoy. So if people have increased symptoms of anxiety, it can end up people limiting what they do. So people may stop activities like going out due to worries about falling over in public. And that means that people do less of what makes them happy, can impact on confidence, and also really just it can lead to loneliness and isolation, and ultimately people can feel quite low in mood. And as I say, it's really common, so it can occur in as many as 50% of those people who fall can become anxious. And it's almost understandable really, because no one wants to experience another fall. And in reality, the problem with it is that anxiety about falling and doing less can make you more likely to fall in the future, as well as making you feel less happy with your life. We don't know why, but more women than men perhaps have a fear of falling, and it is obviously more likely as people increase in age. And I guess those who have had worry or anxiety in the past are also more prone to kind of fear the impact of falling, so it adds to sort of general worries. So I don't know that I guess what our aim here is to make people more aware so that people can talk about it, feel they're happy to share it with anyone who's looking after them or people who are supporting them physically, so that they can get help and there is really good positive evidence that help is available and can improve confidence and help people gradually start to do more. I'm going to move to the next slide. So what I'm going to do is introduce you to the impact of anxiety, what anxiety experiences feels like, and also then the cycle of fear of falling. So what is anxiety? So when we feel anxious, we can get really, in a sense, if we're really nervous about something, it takes us back to that sort of primitive response that was really helpful to us when we were out in the wide world and we needed to be really aware of unpleasant experiences or threats. So we have a kind of fight-flight mechanism, which means that if something we become aware of is anxiety provoking, we either prepare ourselves physically to fight or to flee or run away. So it's a very useful response, primitive response, but that often now we then feel that experience when it's perhaps unnecessary. So the fears that we have in the modern world are perhaps not as threatening as kind of tigers out in the jungle, etc. So what we need to do is actually help ourselves to just be able to look at the anxiety, look at what's threatening us, and weigh up really whether actually it's a lack of confidence and an overreaction, and whether we can actually move forwards to improve confidence and manage our anxiety. So, but what I would also say though is that symptoms of anxiety are quite unpleasant. So they do make you feel that something terrible is going to happen. And obviously in relation to that, it's quite common to avoid situations we associated with those feelings because we don't want to feel anxious. I'm going to break down anxiety before we go and talk about the cycle of fear of falling. We're going to talk about the anxiety in three kind of components. So there's your physical feelings. So they're the sensations in the body when we kind of become quite adrenalized and get a sense of fear of fear of fight and flight. And there's also what we think. So when we experience anxiety, there are a number of thought processes that might be about how we're thinking about falling, how we're thinking about previous the times when we fell, and that there are also behaviours, so things we do when we feel anxious. So I'm going to break those down and talk about each of those in turn. So here's the physical symptoms of anxiety. We don't all experience all of them, but if we're getting anxious, some of the ones that particularly can make it even more difficult are things like if we get anxious and our heart starts racing, we start feeling like we need the toilet more, which can make us want to not go out as well. We might feel dizzy, which also can make us feel that we might be more prone to falling. And so these are and blurred vision, which obviously when you're thinking about kind of mobilizing, it's really important that you feel you can see properly. So all these symptoms kind of create a sense of more likeliness that you might fall. So they're feeling anxious. So those symptoms are something that we need to talk about and think about ways to manage those symptoms. Going to talk a little bit now about the types of thinking that kind of fuel anxiety. So if you have all those symptoms we just talked about around feeling kind of more dizzy, perhaps having vision problems, feeling like your heart's racing, you're likely to think, I feel dizzy, so I mustn't go out, I'll fall over. So predicting that that anxiety is going to make things worse. Also, you can find yourself thinking too much of worrying about the future or the stress in your life and worrying what others think. So, you know, a typical thought might be, how am I going to go and get my shopping if I can't get out? And worrying about kind of coping can make your anxiety worse. Another situation is around seeing threat from all sides. So thinking about situations and thinking about people saying, what will they think of me? I'll get anxious in public, I'll fall over and that'll be embarrassing. And so really just thinking about the threats around you rather than focusing on times when you may have gone out and been able to cope without falling. And also we tend to, when we get anxious, predict the worst. So if in the past there was an experience that you fell over and ended up in hospital, that you'll focus more on that and predict that if I go out, I'll fall over and I'll end up in hospital again, rather than thinking of all the times when you've actually been able to go out and imagining the positives of that. So thinking about, you know, if I got out to get to the shop, even with someone going with me, how good it was to be able to choose all the different things in the local shop, that rather than have someone get my shopping in for me, which can feel safer, but actually doesn't really give you some of those positive experiences of potentially, you know, bumping into someone that you haven't seen for a while, and having a chat. I'm now going to move on to the behaviours. So what we tend to do when we feel anxious. So when we feel anxious, we tend to do what immediately makes us feel better. So obviously, if we're feeling anxious of certain situations, tends to be helpful to avoid them in the first instance, because it will make you feel better in the short term. But the challenge with that is that we get less confident in what we're doing, and we also, perhaps if we're going out less, we become less physically active, and then actually our bodies become less strong, and that's the issue with making it more likely that potentially we're more at risk of falling, rather, you know, counterintuitively, the things we're doing to try and make ourselves feel better actually make the risk of falling worse. So that's why it's really important to interrupt that cycle. And I'm going to go on to talk about how we can do that in a little while. So I'm just going to talk you through the cycle of the fear of falling. So this is a typical cycle that is why having a fall can lead you to a cycle that leads you to actually be more at risk of falling from a psychological point of view. So if we start at the top of this cycle, so someone may have had a fall or a near miss, so a stumble, they've kind of managed to not completely fall, but they've tripped. And that leads to an anxiety, understandably, about falling again. And often that leads to reduced activity, if you're anxious, to prevent falling, which in the short term works really well. But obviously the lack of activity leads to decreased body strength, making people feel more unstable on their feet, feeling less confident about their ability to get out and about safely. And that then leads to an increased risk of falling. And then you can see how that vicious cycle kind of can really spiral, and you end up feeling that you're living kind of in a restricted environment because of the problems with getting out, and then actually you can feel quite lonely and isolated, and quite kind of have a significant impact on your quality of life, and all the things that you used to enjoy doing that you find too hard to go and do. So now what we're going to talk about optimistically is the next steps. So how do we interrupt this, and what are the next steps? So the good news is that it's possible to break the cycle of fear of falling. So it's really important that we work as a wellbeing service with physical health services that you will have looked at perhaps around some of the other videos that have been on live streams that have been put on for Falls Awareness Week. So the first one is kind of having a good assessment. So step one is knowing what contributed to their fall when they had a fall. So was it issues with balance? Was it that there are too many trip hazards? Was it that kind of you're rushing around and actually not paying enough attention? Is it vision problems? So really having a good assessment from a physical health point of view, and a kind of situational point of view of what it was that led to the fall, so that you have a bit more understanding of how to, you know, put some things in place to be more safe. So you do need a sort of an understanding of kind of what your physical health situation is, in terms of realistically appraising what you can do independently, and what other appropriate kind of walking aids might be beneficial. So that might be a stick, that might be kind of four-wheeled walker, which also can be really useful for both carrying your shopping if you're going around to a shop, if you have one locally. So really you do need that physical assessment initially, but after that if you're feeling anxious and you've lost confidence, or alongside that, some psychological self-help steps, coaching can be really helpful. And there is the strongest evidence for therapy that sounds a bit technical, but it is quite simple. That's called cognitive, so looking at the way you're thinking, and behavioural, looking at what you're doing. And then we also look at understanding anxiety symptoms and relaxation. So I'm going to go into this now in a little bit of detail, but obviously it's only a snapshot of the kinds of things that we would do. And we, as a wellbeing service working with anxiety and low mood, are really able to help anyone who is wanting some support, because it's really important that you don't do this on your own, that you have a bit of a coach that can help you kind of set goals, have a go at them, and have a chat about how you're getting on and get some feedback and kind of share the journey with you. So I'm going to talk a little bit more overall about what cognitive behavioural therapy involves. So I know when people talk about psychological therapy, you often think about sitting down, having a long chat about what happens in your past. Cognitive behavioural therapy isn't that. It's really present focused, and it's very much focused on the goal that you want to achieve in the present, and it doesn't focus on past experiences, etc. So one of the most important early starts is what's called psychoeducation on anxiety. So that's really just about understanding what happens in your body, why it happens in your body, and the impact of physical symptoms of anxiety, and a bit about the fight flight cycle, etc., just to help people understand that there's nothing wrong with you that feeling anxious, but it's a very common thing. But what it is important to do is learn about it so you can feel more in control and more able to manage it. The second thing is really thinking about what it is that you want to do more of in your life. So what is the kind of goal that you want for us to work on together? Is that about getting back to meeting up socially with people? Is it about ensuring that you go to any club locally that with an interest that you have? Or is it that you want to be able to go around to the local shop if you have one? What is it you want to get out of being more active? So that's really important. It's got to be something that matters to you. It's got to be, everyone's different. What matters to me, if it might be you enjoy going to church. It might be that you enjoy a game of bowls. Who knows? Whatever your interests are, it's about thinking what's realistic. And then the main part of focusing on cognitive behavioural therapy is really just thinking about reducing your anxiety, looking at anxious thinking, challenging it, and focusing more on the positive, and then graded increases in activity, alongside with hopefully some exercises to help make sure that you're generally strengthening your physical muscles. And there's some really useful exercises out there, including seated activities initially, to try and build up your strength. Okay, this is a bit of a whistle stop tour, but I'm going to give you an example of how we talk about looking at your thoughts. So sometimes you're not even aware of what you're thinking, but we look at and ask people, when you were feeling anxious, what was going through your mind? So might be a thought like, I'm going to fall if I go for a walk. And then in a sense, you tend to take that as a fact when you have a thought. So if you believe that you're going to fall when you go for a walk, it's not surprising you're going to think it's not really a useful thing to do. But what we do is gently think, do you have evidence that that's really likely? What are the experiences from your past of when you've gone out for walks? How often is it that you have fallen? So some helpful thoughts, we'd look at building these up so that you have them to hand when you have thoughts like this in the future. So you might think, okay, there are many things I can do to reduce my risk. So thinking about the age that we talked about in the earlier slides, and also thinking about, you know, what was it that led you to fall when you were out before? So what are the trip hazards? And you could think, well, I've actually done a few things, and I've learnt, you know, to move that mat from where I slipped before, or kind of I think that actually if I use a walker, maybe then I know that I can walk quite safely. So I can think I'm fairly safe at home with my walker. So would it be okay if I'm out of the house? Probably I could do that. I've gone for a walk many times before without falling. And I know the more often I do it, it'll get easier. So I need to start small. And if I go out, I'm likely to see people, which I like, if that's what you do like, and I'll feel better and gain more strength. So really, we will help people to just think around and actually build up more of the alternative thoughts. So rather than sticking with the negative thought about falling. We also will work with people to really think about the types of meaningful activities that matter to you, so, or your carer, or your and how we can work with you and any support people you have to think about what matters and what impact kind of will make the most positive benefit for you. So we'll think about kind of what types of things you either have done in the past and want to get back to, or what kind of new activities you could put in place. And sometimes we'll work in conjunction with one of the other kind of services, for instance, social prescribers, to actually think about what's available locally that you can get to safely. And we'll focus not on what you can't do, but what you can do, and think about kind of graded steps towards getting to that goals. We'll also introduce you to a range of activities to help with kind of reducing anxiety. And there's a range of different types of opportunities for that, so that we can think about which ones will help for you. Some of them relate to kind of progressive muscular relaxation, so that's around kind of going through your muscle groups, because when we get anxious we get very tense. So going from either from the bottom of your toes, tips of your toes, all the way, and tensing and then relaxing each muscle group as you move through the body. And that can make you realize that you were feeling very tense, and actually resets your body to feeling much less anxious and tight, which can help with fluid movement. We also can introduce you to kind of more breathing exercises if you're someone who, when you get anxious, you tend to over breathe too quickly and too shallowly, to help you to kind of slow that down and relax and breathe in a way that doesn't increase anxiety. Other types of things could be around, you know, some of the physical exercises, gentle stretches, kind of listening to music, thinking about what music makes you feel most relaxed, and also there are sometimes exercises, mindfulness exercises, or meditations that can really help with improving physical sensations of anxiety, alongside thinking about the way we were thinking and these gradual phases of kind of increasing goals towards what you want to do. So I'm coming to the end of the kind of presentation, but just really wanted to make, and that was a whistle stop tour, but just really wanted to make sure that people are aware that there is often this anxiety component to falling, and that there is help available. So if you know someone who benefit from support with kind of fear of falling, you can as a carer or someone who knows that person, support them to refer themselves over the phone, or if they have the internet or you have the internet, to access support. And we in the wellbeing service are really welcoming of people to come forward for our support. We are obviously currently within the COVID kind of pandemic, and so a lot of our work has been over the phone, or if people have it via video, contacts, but really those can be helpful, as well as to just coach people to support them through making steps to feel more confident again. No problem's too small, and if we aren't the right place, we will help support you to access somewhere else that could be more appropriate for your support. And we welcome self-referrals and supported referrals from relatives if people give consent that they would like to be referred, and also professional referrals from other agencies or your GP or other health providers. We are trying to get back to working more from physical basis and offering people face-to-face support, and obviously we recognise that particularly older people that find that a bit easier, and we're working with local primary care practices to get our services integrated as possible into where you normally access support. So please do spread the word about our service, and we're really happy and willing to have a talk to you and see how much we can help you to increase your confidence and get back to some of those activities that make you feel kind of you enjoy your life. And as I said, wellbeing, our strapline is helping you live your life. Thank you for your time, and I will upload this, and hopefully people will find this really useful. I'm just going to add this final quote. So, talking about aging, so man does not cease to play because he grows old. Man grows old because he ceases to play. That's a quote from George Bernard Shaw. And I just wanted to sort of highlight it, that it's really important to consider the psychological component alongside physical health to really show that you can have good quality of life, whatever your age. Thank you. I've left my email there. I'm happy for anyone to contact me if you've got any queries, and happy to come out and do presentations locally in the future. Thank you for your time.